Are you be cooking in that area?
Yeah, right here.
Okay. Okay.
Are we live?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, welcome to our very first quarantine cooking. I literally never had any idea this would be coming, but I know a lot of us are stuck in our houses, and maybe this will be something fun you can either do for yourself or with your family, with your kids. But let's get started the way we have to do all of our cooking. Before, but especially now, wash your hands. So let's go wash our hands. So what's your favorite song so far that people have posted for singing while you do this? Anybody have a favorite? I tend to count to 20 just to make it easy. And here we go. So we've done that, we've done this, we've cleaned our thumbs, and we've rinsed everything. Now we're ready to get started. Okay. So I posted online for everyone what the recipe is, the ingredients are. I put that, I think, on Instagram, but we'll go through it together. And one of the things I wanted to do is, everybody's grocery supplies are just a little bit crazy, and we're avoiding grocery stores, but also grocery stores in some places have plenty of one item, and then in other places none. So we'll talk about substitutions and things that you can put if you didn't end up with what you wanted in the grocery store, things that can still make it taste absolutely wonderful if you only have limited supplies. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put in the fat in the bowl. If you have butter, I'm not using butter for cooking for cookies, even though the taste is better. Butter's a perishable, it has to be in the fridge, it's not shelf stable, and it really can affect your cooking more, like with cooking vegetables or things like that. So I'm leaving my butter for those kinds of recipes. And for this, I'm going to use just some vegetable fat, some Crisco. So you can use butter, you can use Crisco, you can use a mix of the two. You can also use lard. My favorite really is Crisco. It's the way I grew up making them. And one of the things about Crisco that's different than butter is that it will hold the air more, so you're going to get lighter, fluffier cookies. So you're going to need 1 cup of whatever fat you're using. So I'm going to be using full Crisco, so we're going to stick it in the carton. And I'm a 1 bowl cook. Anytime I can avoid getting another pan dirty, I tend to do that. So what I'm going to do is show you how to add the dry ingredients without having to put them in a separate bowl. You certainly can. It's just, I don't really see the sense in it when it's really not necessary, depending on how you mix it together when you put them in with these ingredients in the right order. So here we have 1 cup of Crisco. We make it pretty flat, and then we're just going to take it and we're going to drop it into the bowl. You're going to clean off as much as you can, and then you're done with that. So there's your fat. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add the sugar. And for this part, I follow the old Toll House recipe. And use 3/4 cup of granulated, 3/4 cup of brown. You can kind of play with those if you like it more with regular sugar or more brown sugar flavor. That is something you can play with, but I tend to like a good balance of it. So we're going to do 3/4 cup of granulated sugar. And now we're going to do 3/4 cup of brown sugar. Now, if you have brown sugar that's in your pantry, that you went to pull out to make these and realize that it's hard as a rock, here's what you do. You can either put it in the microwave on a low heat, so maybe 2 or 3, for like 30 seconds and check it and then try it again. If it has absolutely no liquid left, that's not going to help. So you can actually take that really hard chunk of brown sugar and you can put it in a blender or a food processor and beat it until it's pure, and it'll almost make like powder. But you can still use it that way, and it's a way to still be able to use up your ingredients that you have, even if they're not in the most perfect condition. So now we have 3/4 cup of brown sugar, 3/4 cup of granulated sugar, and a cup of Crisco. And now what we're going to do is we're going to blend those together. Now I'm doing this the hardest way, which is just with a whisk and a spatula. If you have a blender, this is where you would use a blender and you can beat these together and it'll go really fast. But I'm doing it this way so anybody who doesn't have a blender still knows how to do it. If you're using a KitchenAid, this is where you go ahead and put it on high speed for maybe a minute. But for now, we're just going to blend these together. So what we're going to do is we're going to mix the brown sugar and the white sugar together, the best, like that. And then we're going to start smushing in the Crisco. So you're going to take and just push it together. And as you can see, it starts to incorporate into the fat so that it becomes one ingredient instead of 3. And the reason you want to do this first is because this will give you the base for your cookies. And by putting these 3 ingredients together, then you'll have a perfect base depending on what other ingredients you might want to add. So now that you can see it's pretty well blended in together, now we're going to add our eggs. So if you're using a KitchenAid, you can still leave it beating and you can drop 1 egg in at a time. If you're using a hand mixer, put your mixer down, drop in your eggs. This is just 2 eggs. These are 2 large eggs. You can use 2 medium, 2 extra large. It's not that big of a difference. And now watch here. This is part of what I'm talking about using 1 bowl. Do you want to show this a little closer? See how I drop the eggs in? Now I can take just that one little section and beat the eggs before I try to put them in with the rest of the ingredients. You didn't need to put a separate bowl to be able to blend the eggs together, and it still worked out just about the same. Okay. So now we have the eggs mixed in. As you can see, it's still a little lumpy. But we're going to go ahead and now we're going to add the vanilla. Now if you are using regular vanilla extract, you're only going to want to use 1 teaspoon. Vanilla extract has flavoring, but it's not a natural ingredient. It's been infused into that flavoring, so you only want about 1 teaspoon or it's going to taste bad. If you're using Mexican vanilla, you can afford to get it a little more intense, so I'm going to use a tablespoon. So we're going to mix that in. You're going to use the same method we did before and blend it in. And now is when it's going to be as liquid as it's going to get. So we're going to take the whisk and we're going to make sure all of the lumps are out. I'm going to leave that there. And now we're going to whisk it just a little bit to get all of the lumps of the Crisco and sugar mixed together. So now we have that done, and now it's time to add the flour. So here's a trick if you're only going to use 1 bowl. Let me wet my hands, get some of that fat off of them. Once you add all the flour in, it's a really thick dough, and it's hard to make sure it gets blended. So what I do is I take, this is gonna be 2 1/4 cups flour. If you want to add oatmeal, you can add a cup of flour and then take away about 1/2 cup of the flour that you use with the 1 cup of oatmeal. If you're adding nuts, they don't really change the ratio all that much. But if you're making it the way I normally do with just the flour, then what you're gonna do is you're gonna take, let's find the 1/4 cup. There we go. That 1/4 cup, we're gonna take that and we're gonna put that in the 1 cup holder. And now we're going to add the other dry ingredients just in here. So that's 1 cup of salt. I'm sorry, not 1 cup. 1 teaspoon of salt. Ah, and I forgot the baking soda. Hold on. Okay, now we're going to do 1 cup of baking soda. So if your thing's about half empty, you can pull it to the back, have it come up, and you just need a flat 1 teaspoon. That one was a little bit shy of full, so we're going to add a little bit more. There we go. Now I'm just going to take my spoon, I'm going to mix those 2 in. So now, as you can see, I have the salt and the flour and the baking soda blended together here, and I'm going to sprinkle them over my liquid dough. And I'm just going to blend this small amount in, because this little small amount isn't that hard to blend. And this way, the salt and the baking soda get blended early before the dough is really, really thick. So you're going to want to make sure it's blended well. We have all of the dry ingredient blended in, and then we can add our chocolate chips and then the rest of the flour. So there we are, nice and blended. And now we're going to add chocolate chips. You can add 1 to 2 cups. You can add a small bag. If you're trying to conserve, you can make it less and they'll still taste good. It's just to taste. So we'll add the chocolate chips in, and these are just semi-sweet morsels, but you can use dark chips, you can use white chips, whatever your family likes. And we're going to blend those in. As you can see, because the dough is still really soft, it's easy to get the chocolate chips nice and mixed and evenly distributed. So now we're going to add the other 2 cups of flour, and then we'll be ready to put them out onto a baking sheet. If you're using cookie sheets, you can use no stick to spray the bottom. You also, if you don't have no stick on hand, you can take a little bit of cooking oil and put it on a small piece of paper towel and rub it all over the cookie sheet. I use parchment paper because I have a baking stone, but if you're just using cookie sheets, that works perfectly fine. One thing about cookie sheets, when you take them out of the oven, don't put them directly in cold water, because that's what will cause them to seize up, and then every time after that when you bake with them, they'll bend. So wait until they've come back to room temperature before you put them under water. So now if you'd like to see how the dough looks with all of the flour, you have this nice thick dough. And one way you can tell if it's done is to pick it up and feel it. And if it doesn't stick to your fingers, then it's pretty much ready to go. So you can have more flour or less flour, but that's a really good test. So now we're going to go ahead and put them on our parchment paper or your cookie sheet. Now, if you want your cookies just completely perfectly round, you can take and roll them. I'll show you how to do that. You can take and roll them like this, and they're gonna come out really fat, and they're gonna have a little mound even once they're cooked, but they're gonna be a perfect shape. If you don't care so much about it, then it doesn't need to be that big of a job, and you can just literally drop them, and they'll still work just as well. The dough won't be quite so packed, so they'll come out a little flatter, but with it being Crisco, they're going to keep their shape much more than if they had butter. So we'll go ahead and put them, and you're gonna want them at about what for me is almost a finger apart if you don't want them to touch and lose their shape. So now we'll have them there. And now you're going to want to bake them for about 10 to 12 minutes. So what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that the oven is heated up to 325 degrees to 350 degrees. You know your oven better than anyone else, so if it cooks things a little fast, go towards the 325. If it cooks things a little slower, move up towards the 350 degrees. But we'll go ahead and put them in now, and then it's going to be about 8 minutes, and then you'll be able to take them out. So do I have any questions, or? Okay, here we go. And I'm going to stick them in. I had this on so it'll come right back up to the right temperature. But anyway, I hope you had fun. Once they're cooked, you bring them out. You'll put them on a cooling rack, or you can heat them hot from the oven. But whatever you do, at least your house is going to smell amazing all afternoon. And that's a pretty good thing for a Monday in the middle of quarantine. So thanks for joining me, and we'll do this again.